So welcome to our first lecture of the year for this world history class. And this lecture is going to be done in three parts. The first part is all about Muhammad and the beginnings of Islam and its early spread. And then we will close when we get to the Abbasid Empire. So what we see here on this map is we see the Islamic world, right? And when we see the Islamic world, it's going to start here in Mecca, and then it's quickly going to spread to everything you see here that is not a yellow color. So from Spain or Al-Andalus all the way into India. So let's start with the life of Muhammad. Muhammad was born in Mecca, which is in current-day Saudi Arabia, sometime around the year 570 CE. We don't know exactly when he was born, but sometime around then. And so Muhammad has an interesting upbringing. He was born into a wealthy trading family. Mecca was on a trade route. It was an oasis town in the middle of the desert. And so people would naturally stop there as they go up and down the Arabian Peninsula to get resupplied and watered. And so it became a trading center, and it was a very cosmopolitan city. There were Christians there, and Jews, and animists, and all kinds of different religions that Muhammad is going to be exposed to at an early age. So while he was born to a wealthy trading family, he, however, is going to be orphaned at a fairly early age. And so his extended family is wealthy, but he is rather poor. And so he will grow up on the streets of Mecca, sometimes without enough food. And so when he gets older, that will affect his ideas of giving to the poor, as we will see. If we see in the bottom right-hand picture, you see this is an image, a Muslim image of the birth of Muhammad. We can see here he is, the birth of Muhammad, and there's angels there marking this great event that will be part of the Muslim faith. He gets older and he marries an older woman who's wealthy. She's also part of a trading family. And so through her, he starts to run her business. They have a loving marriage. And so he goes from poverty to wealth. And he's doing all right. When he gets to be about 40, a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, he has what we might call a spiritual crisis. He's about middle-aged, and he's wondering if this is all there is to life. You know, when he was young, he probably wanted wealth and stability, like all of us do. And then when he had that, he's successful, he's got a wonderful marriage, he's accepted. He wonders, is there more to life than this? Is there something spiritual that he's lacking? Because he has all the materialistic comforts of life. And so he starts to think about this, but he can't contemplate the meaning of life when he's in Mecca because he's busy with his business. And busy with married life, and the town is noisy, and so he goes up into the mountains, and there is a cave up in the mountains around Mecca, and he goes there at night to just be cool and to think about what his life is all about. And so according to Muslim tradition, he is going to have a visitation from the angel Gabriel. And so this angel comes to him, and you can see Muhammad here. He has the fire around his head, seeing enlightenment. In the Christian world, it's usually a halo that we see on religious figures. And so the angel Gabriel, according to Islamic tradition, comes to him and says, Allah, or God, knows that you have been searching, and Allah wants to make you his last prophet, his last person that he's ever going to send to earth to explain to the people what the meaning of life is, what God wants us all to do with our lives and how to treat one another. And so this, in the Islamic tradition, is called the Night of Power, where Muhammad gets his first revelation from Allah through Gabriel. Now, this is going to heavily build on Judaism and Christianity because, like I said, there were lots of Jews and Christians in Mecca already. And so this is appealing to Muhammad, this idea of monotheism, one God. And Muhammad would say to his soon-to-be followers that Allah is the same God as the God of the Christians and the Jews, and he has already revealed his message to people through Jesus and Moses and Abraham and Isaac, a lot of the people in the Jewish and Christian tradition, and they all were coming from the same God and had the same message. But over time, the message has changed in people's minds. They've forgotten it. They've got it wrong. And so God is sending one more prophet to the world to tell people the will of Allah or God. And so we have this idea in Islam that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. He is the last prophet God will send to humanity, their last chance to really get God's message correctly. And so that's what he says. Now, hopefully, he would convert Jews and Christians to his faith, because he says, "I'm the same faith as you. I'm just a more recent, updated edition, a more direct path to Allah or God." And some Jews and Christians convert. But really, his first converts are going to be his friends and family. His wife is his first convert, and then it'll grow from there. And so Judaism and Christianity and Islam form what we today call the great monotheistic face of the world. They are all believing in one God, and Judaism will remain small, but Christianity, of course, has spread since its inception, and then Islam, of course, will spread rapidly after Muhammad starts to have his messages with the angels, and then spread his faith. So let's take a little bit more in-depth look at the beliefs of Islam, just a very survey kind of level. And so, like Judaism and Christianity, who he's being impacted by, there is a holy book in Judaism called the Torah, which is on the left, and of course in the Christian tradition there is the Bible, which is the Torah plus additional books in the Old Testament, and then the Gospels of the New, and so forth. And so Islam says those are all fine. God sent his message to people, but like I said, over time it's gotten diluted or they've lost their way, and so here we're going to have an updated version, a more direct path to God, and it's going to be written down in the Quran. And so Muhammad will start giving his revelations, and then his followers later on will start to write down his life and his teachings in two books. One is called the Quran, and the other one is called the Hadith. And so just like the other religions, it's monotheistic. Just like the other religions, the monotheistic faith is going to have a central holy book. And so high literacy here in what will be the Muslim world. All Muslims are commanded to read the Quran and to know it, because that is the word of God. And so we all have this. And so when Islam starts to spread, they're very tolerant and accepting of Jews and Christians because they believe they follow the same God. They have the same prophets, just with the addition of Muhammad, and they also have this tradition of a holy book. So next, well, what does Islam tell people they need to do? And so there are these things called the 5 pillars of the faith. In other words, the 5 core beliefs that Muslims need to do and believe to be Muslim, or one who submits a Muslim, right? And so these are not in any particular order, but the first one we're going to talk about is you have to publicly state your faith. And so here it is in Arabic on the modern flag of Saudi Arabia, but Muslims are supposed to say there is no God but Allah, saying that they are monotheistic, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, the last one, and that's really the core message of Islam. They are monotheistic, God is Allah, and that you should follow the teachings of Muhammad to make God happy and to get into heaven. Next, you must pray 5 times a day. And so Muslims, now that seems like a lot for some people and maybe not as much to others, but the idea of praying 5 times a day is that all throughout your day, in the morning and in the afternoon and the evening and then at night, the reason you need to do this is because you're supposed to continuously connect with your God, and constantly think, what would Allah have us do? How is my day going? Am I being a good Muslim? Am I being dedicated? So it's supposed to create this personal connection with Allah. And so we see, here we have in calligraphy, we see it being kind of drawn out of a person at prayer. Now, originally in Islamic communities in the Arabian Peninsula, among the first Muslims, they considered it sacrilegious or irreligious to draw images of animals or plants or humans. Because that is like recreating what God created. And so there's a tradition in the Islamic world of doing geometric patterns or this kind of calligraphy as an art form. And so that's an example of how Islam is impacting kind of the art culture of this part of the world. Next, you're supposed to give alms to the poor. You're supposed to give to charity. You're supposed to give to the poor people. And of course, maybe this came from Muhammad's early days when he was poor on the streets of Mecca. And so, he just carried with him that idea that you should help other people. And so that's one of the pillars of the faith. Next, once in Muslims' lives, they must take a Hajj if they're able to. A Hajj is a trip, a pilgrimage to where it all began, Mecca. To reconnect with your faith, to reconnect with the other believers, what we call Dar al-Islam, the Islamic world. And as we see Islam spreads, this is going to have a huge impact on world history, because Islam, as I had said, will spread from Spain through North Africa, obviously the Arabian Peninsula, through Southwest Asia, all the way to India. And people in all of those different cultures and places will all come together once a year, not every year, but once in their life, and they will take their Hajj to Mecca, and they will circle the Kaaba, which is this holy place right in the center of the picture that you can see here. There it is. And all of these dots, these are people circling the Kaaba, saying prayers, reflecting on their life. And as they come together, they will exchange ideas and thoughts and cultural practices. And so we will see in our future notes of how all of these things, ideas, crops, technology, is going to spread rapidly through the Islamic world. And that's really what this course is about at its essence. World history is about the interactions of people and how they spread ideas back and forth. So the Hajj, with bringing all of these Muslim pilgrims together, is going to play a big part in that. And of course, the fifth pillar, well, the fifth that we're going to cover, is the fast during the month of Ramadan. So the month of Ramadan is the holy month of Islam, and during that month, you're not supposed to eat or drink from sunup to sundown. And of course, you can eat and drink after, but it's this month-long of fasting, and lots of religions have this tradition of where you deny yourself something for a period of time to kind of force yourself to realize that that you're focused on your faith and you're part of something bigger, and you need to reconnect with it and suffer a little bit to make you reflect. And so we see that these are the 5 pillars of the faith. Now, over time, there develops kind of a sixth pillar of the faith, and that is called jihad. And so for most Muslims around the world, jihad is to wage a war, a struggle internally against sin in your life, to constantly be a warrior in your life against evil and sin and bad. And so this is the concept of jihad, this holy war against sin in your daily life, in your working and praying and living life. And so we have these pillars, these things that hold up the faith of Islam. So let's now go back to politics a little bit. And so we talk about the conquest of Islam. And so when Muhammad started to spread his message in Mecca, like I said, it went to his followers. It went to his early followers were his friends and family. And then it starts to spread a little bit more and a little bit more. And before you know it, his message is kind of angering the people of Mecca, because they either don't want to convert or they don't like his message that you're not supposed to drink, and you're not supposed to smoke, and you're not supposed to do things that'll keep you from focusing on Allah, and so they don't like that message. They also see him as a power threat to the traditional ruling elite of the city because he's getting all these followers. And so they kick him out of Mecca. And so he will then go to the next city called Medina or Yathrib. And so from there he starts to spread his faith around the Arabian Peninsula. And so this is the Hijra. The Hijra is the beginning of the Islamic calendar. around the year 600. So in the Islamic world, here in the West, we say it's, I don't know, 2020, where you subtract about 600 years, and that would be the Islamic calendar, because people or cultures start their calendar from when they think it's like the most important event. And when Muhammad is kicked out of Mecca and he goes to Yathrib, or the city of Medina, it's the same thing. He's starting his ministry to the world. And so we see that as like the event. So as he goes out into the desert and he goes out to this other trading town, he starts to unite the warring pastoral tribes of the Arabian Peninsula. Now these people are already warriors because they're nomadic people, and they go from oasis to oasis looking for new pasture land and water to feed their camels and herds. And so they always have been fighting for resources. And so they've always throughout history been this kind of rough and tumble world in the Arabian Peninsula where it's tribal violence versus tribal violence. But Muhammad comes and starts to give them this uniting message of Islam. And so instead of having them attack each other, he says, we're all going to be Muslim, and so then let's go out and conquer the world for Islam. And so he takes this kind of inward conflict and he ends that, and then it starts to force itself outward. And so these will make up his early warriors that will spread the faith of Islam through conquest and trade, as we'll see, and also missionaries. And so by the end of Muhammad's life, this green area that you can see here, this is more or less the area that we're going to see Muhammad spread his faith with his followers. So the majority of the Arabian Peninsula, and then up into what is modern-day Iraq and Syria a little bit. And then he dies. He dies around the age of 62, which was pretty old for that time in history. And so then there's this crisis. What's going to happen without the leader of this faith? Will it disintegrate with him, with his death? And so what happens is his followers come together, and the top followers of his faith decide that what they will do is they will elect a new leader. And this new position of leader, he cannot claim that he is a prophet divinely inspired by Allah, because Muhammad said that he is the last prophet. And so in the Islamic world, for quite a while, well, from this point on really, we're going to see that Islam is not hierarchical like other faiths. Christianity is hierarchical in many ways, because you have, like in Catholicism, you have a pope and cardinals and bishops all the way down. But here in Islam, we can't have that, because there's nobody that can claim that they are the next prophet of Allah, because Muhammad said he was the only one. And so there is not going to be this hierarchical structure that we see in other parts of the world in other faiths. It's going to be very local and regional. However, there is going to be political hierarchy. And so when the followers of Muhammad, after he dies, what they do is they elect a new leader, and it's a new position called Khalif, C-A-L-I-P-H. And the Khalif is going to be the political leader, the leader of the military, but he is also responsible for spreading the faith. So he's somewhat of a religious leader, but he cannot come up with new revelations. And so combining mosque and state is this new position called the Khalif. And so he is a religious leader, but he cannot create new traditions and beliefs. And so he's more political, but a little bit religious too, because he's responsible for spreading the faith of Islam. And so under this new person's leadership, there's going to be actually 4 guys. They're called the rightly guided Khalifs. There are 4 of them. And first one leads Islam and spreads a little bit more, and then he dies, and they elect a new rightly guided Khalif, and then so forth and so on, until we get to the last Khalif, Ali. And he is the last person that personally knew Muhammad. And these people, these caliphs, they get their legitimacy. The people will follow them because they were all good friends of Muhammad. They all knew him. And so when somebody would come to them and say, why should I follow you as the leader of Islam and of this political empire? Well, I could say, because I was good friends with Muhammad, and I know what Muhammad would say. Now, when the last of the rightly guided caliphs die, Ali, we're going to have another crisis in Islam. We're going to have to figure out who's going to be the leader, because there's nobody left alive who was a good friend of Muhammad at that time who can claim leadership. And so we'll come back to politics again in a second. And so let's go to Islamic society. And so in Islamic society, as this new empire starts to spread, they spread politically and they spread religiously, we're going to see that there are social classes that develop wherever they go. So at the top, we have Muslims. And so these are people who have converted to Islam. They might be Arab, they might be other ethnic groups, but they are Muslims who have converted, and they're at the top of the pyramid because they are members of the predominant faith that is ruling the society. Underneath them, we have Jews and Christians, or what we call people of the book. These are people that Islamic leaders are okay with. They wish they'd convert, but they're okay with because Muhammad said that they follow the same God as Allah, and they have the same prophets that Islam says, that Jesus was a prophet. Christians would say he's a Messiah, but Muslims would say he was a prophet, had a good message. Just not a Messiah. And so they're okay with Jews and Christians because they believe in the same things that Jews and Christians do. We just are adding this, the Quran. And so, Jews and Christians are kind of a lower level because they're not Muslims, so they can't be in positions of leadership. But they're allowed to practice their faith. The only thing they must do is they must pay the jizya. So a jizya is like a religious tax. And so they say basically, look, you can go to church, you can go to a mosque, you can go to a temple or a synagogue, but you have to pay a tax to practice your faith, which you can view in two ways. You can view it as a punishment, or you can view it not as punishment because they're allowing them to continue their faith and not forcing them to convert. Anyway, so they're the kind of this mid-level, and then below are people that the Muslims encounter in their conquest that are not Jews and Christians. And so they're not people of the book. And so they are going to be at the bottom of society. And so we will talk more about this later, but when Islam makes its way into India later on in the year 711, we're going to see that Muslim armies will attack Buddhists and wipe out some of their temples and take some of their wealth because they weren't people of the book and they refused to convert. But we'll also see that Muslims will accept Hindus. And we'll talk about that when we get to South Asia as well. And the Hindus will form a new group within the society as well. But for now, let's keep it simple. Let's say there are three levels. There's Muslims, there's Jews and Christians, and then there are people who are animists perhaps, or some other faith that were considered beneath in society because they weren't believing in the same God as Jews and Christians and Muslims. And so they're going to take the lower status of society. Let's look at the impact next of Islam on another aspect of society, women. So as Islam starts, women could own businesses, women did not have to be veiled, women could get a divorce, women had quite a few social, cultural rights. But as Islam spreads, it's going to come in contact with two empires. It's going to come in contact with the Christian Byzantine Empire, north, and then it's going to come in contact with the Persian Empire to kind of the northeast from Arabia. And these two empires have a tradition of having women wear a veil out in public and have them be chaperoned by men. And so as these cultures interact, Muslims are going to say, yes, we like this. And so it's going to be part of the Muslim tradition moving forward that women should be under the veil and that they should be escorted wherever they go or chaperoned. And so, depending on where you live in the world today, this can kind of take two interpretations. If you're from the West and you believe in the idea of individual freedoms and rights for women and men, you think that this is something that's taking away women's rights because it's making a more patriarchal or male-dominated society. If you're from the Islamic world at the time, say this is a good thing because women are going to be chaperoned from men, which means they're going to be protected and they're not going to be raped and beaten because the men in their family will always be there to protect them. And so culturally, it just kind of depends where you are, how you view this today. Next, so this is going to be a patriarchal society, and so that means men in charge. And so women and men cannot worship in the same place. The Islamic world would say men and women need to focus on their connection to Allah and their prayers, and they can't be sitting next to somebody who they may have an attraction to that would distract them. And so, and there are other reasons as well, but, so we need to keep them separate so they can focus on their faith. And so they cannot worship together. Women cannot hold political positions. They will be an important part of the family structure, and they will have some influence over their husbands in that way, but they cannot be political leaders. Next, women cannot be killed. Before Muhammad, infanticide, female infanticide, or the killing of female babies, was a practice that was done. And so, in order to protect women, because in the Islamic world, all people, all believers are equal in the eyes of Allah, we cannot let somebody be killed because we're all equal in the eyes of Allah. And so women can no longer suffer from female infanticide, killing female babies in favor of having male babies. And so we see that women are also being granted some legal protections here. Next, we have the practice of polygamy. And so that means that you can have more than one wife. The legal limit at this time was 4 wives, because that's what it said in the Quran. And so 4 wives, this again can be viewed in a positive or negative way depending on your cultural traditions. In a positive way, let's say that you are a woman who doesn't have a husband, so you have no protection, you have nobody to help, since you can't own a business, you have nobody who can provide for you, and so in situations like that, it's allowable for a man to take another wife, and so this woman is now going to be protected. Perhaps your husband dies and you're a widow, and so you need protection, and so this allows for men to protect more women. If you're from the more Western world, you see this as a way of lowering the status of women, because the more of anything you have, its value goes down, and so if you're a woman, you have less control of your husband if he has 3 other wives. So let's not get caught up too much in how we view it's a positive or a negative. It just is part of the culture, and it just depends on where you're from and how you view it. Next, so another impact of Islam on society is that the government will take the Quran as its legal code. And so this is known as Sharia law. And so if I'm an Islamic ruler, I'm the Khalif, the leader of the state, and I'm the leader of the empire, I don't need to create a separate legal system. We already have it inbuilt. The Quran already says, and the Hadith already say what is allowed and what is not allowed in life. And so why should the government create new rules when we have rules set up in the Quran? And so here's another example of Islam impacting society, is it's going to impact the legal system known as Sharia. Next, we're also going to see Islam spread the language of the Arabic language. So the Arabic language is the language that was spoken by Muhammad and the people in Mecca and his early followers. And so that's what the Quran and the Hadith are written in. And it is a pillar that all Muslims need to know their Quran, and they need to know the sayings in it. And so it, of course, can be translated into other languages as it spreads. But in order to really get the real meaning of it and not have anything lost in translation from one language to another, Muslims need to read and speak Arabic. And so as the Islamic world spreads, the language of the Arabic language will spread throughout Darul Islam, or the Islamic world, which allows people to communicate and ideas to get spread faster, trade to go faster. So next, let's go to B, expansion and division. So the Islamic world will spread quickly from its beginnings here in Mecca, and we talked about the how Muhammad was kicked out of Mecca and went to Medina or Yathrib, and that began kind of the Islamic calendar. And then throughout his life, Muhammad is going to spread Islam to the Arabian Peninsula, and then the right legated caliphs will spread it even further. And then what we have next is we have a big, huge dynasty called the Umayyad Dynasty. And the Umayyad Dynasty is going to spread it to everything you see in green here. It's a really expansionist dynasty that happens very rapidly in terms of world history. Now, the Umayyad Dynasty gets its name from the Umayyad family. That was kind of the extended family that's going to take over. And we'll talk about that in a bit, the transition from the right legated caliphs to the Umayyad dynasty. So let's kind of go through this, a brief timeline. The founder of Islam is Muhammad, and then when he dies, we have 4 rulers in succession called the right legated caliphs that all knew Muhammad personally, so that's where the legitimacy to rule comes from. And when the last right Legato Khalif dies, the last one who really knew Muhammad, Ali, then we have this new family take over, and it's the Umayyad family, and they really spread it throughout this part of the world. So, how do the Umayyads treat people who are non-believers? Does it change? Does it stay the same? Is it a change or a continuity? And so they're going to continue the idea of the people of the book. And so Jews and Christians, and then when we get over here into India, Hindus, they are all going to be protected people called Dini. Dini are going to be Jews, Christians, Hindus, people that have a religious book that they follow, that Muslims are going to say, okay, we're fine with, as long as you pay the jizya tax, you're okay, and you can continue to practice your belief. And so we see that Islam continues this idea of acceptance. One, because you can get jizya tax money, so that's good for the empire if you continue to get this tax money. Plus, if you start to clamp down on religion, you start to persecute them, then people might rebel, and that's going to weaken the empire from within. So there's all kinds of reasons here to continue to let people of different faiths practice their religion. Next, let's talk about, so as Islam spreads, there's going to be what happens to a lot of faiths, a split in the faith occurs. It happens in Christianity when you see we go from Catholics to Protestants and so forth and so on, in Judaism as well, and in Hinduism and Buddhism as well. And so let's talk about the split in the Islamic faith. And so it really happens when we go from the last of the rightly guided caliphs to the Umayyad dynasty. And so we had Muhammad, as we said, he was the first, the founder of Islam, and then we had the four rightly guided caliphs, and then when the last caliph who knew Muhammad dies, his name is Ali, when he dies, people wonder, well, who's going to be the next caliph, the next leader of the faith, because nobody knew Muhammad. Everybody who knew Muhammad as a colleague and a friend, as a leader, is now dead. And so the Umayyad family takes over. And so there are going to be some Muslims that are not okay with this. Like, no. We can't just have any random wealthy family take over the caliphate, right? The leadership of Islam. We need to have somebody that was connected in some way to Muhammad, like the four rightly guided caliphs. And so we see this group of Muslims called Shiite or Shia. The sect is called Shiite, the people are called Shia, and they say, no. The leader of Islam must be somebody who was related to Muhammad in some way. And Ali, the last of the four rightly guided caliphs, he was related to Muhammad through marriage. And so they say, Ali's family should now be the leader of the Muslim empire. And so they're going to splinter off as kind of a sect within Islam. Right? Now, it says they're a minority, and so then and now, Shia are not the majority at all of Muslims. They're not a significant majority at all. They're a large minority, but they're still a minority. And so they are going to have some friction with the majority of Muslims. It starts out over these political reasons, then over time, more religious ideas kind of creep in that separate them from the rest of the Muslim community as well. Today, you'll find most Shia in modern-day Iran and in modern-day Iraq. Next, we have Sunni. Now, Sunni are the majority of Muslims then and now. And at that time, when we have the last of the rightly guided caliphs die, Ali, and we're looking for a new leader, when the Umayyad family take over, who were not related to Muhammad in any way, and they say, we're the leaders, most people are okay with it. They just want to live their lives, they want to be good Muslims, and they want to follow the Quran and Sharia law, and whoever's in charge of the empire is in charge of the empire. And so this is the majority of Muslims then and now. And like I said, over time, there's going to be more than just a political difference between Shia and Sunni. There's going to be religious beliefs that also kind of start to filter in that separate the two. Next, later on, we're going to have another group of Muslims be created, and it's the Sufi. Now, the Sufi, they're going to fulfill the role mostly of missionaries for Islam. The Sufi are looking for a more spiritual relationship with Allah. They're trying to get a more personal connection, and so they believe in mysticism. and dance and in music and anything that can heighten your senses, heighten your emotions, that help you feel Allah in your life. And so they're looking for this kind of more mystical spirituality, if you will. Spirituality means this more intense, personal, emotional connection with Allah. And so they're very excited about their faith and they want to go spread it. And so these Sufi will go out into the world and start to spread Islam. So Islam is going to spread through conquest. It's also going to spread through missionaries. And as we're going to see in later parts of the lectures, it's also going to spread through merchants. People are trading. Next, under Sufi, we've already talked about missionaries. Let's talk about ascetic. So ascetic means that you give up a lot of things that make you feel good traditionally. So if I'm like in Christianity, you have ascetic monks where they focus their whole life on God and they give up maybe talking, they take a vow of silence, or they give up sex, they take a vow of chastity, or they give up money, they take a vow of poverty. That's ascetic, giving up things that the rest of the world values so you can focus on your faith. And so some Sufis are going to be ascetic, and as they go out to be missionaries and spread the faith, it's really going to impress people they're not Muslim because, wow, these holy men, they've given up a lot for Allah and their faith. Maybe they have something to say. I really respect what they're doing because I couldn't do that. And so we're going to see that this ascetic lifestyle is going to help these people spread Islam because people respect them for being so devoted to their faith. So that's it for this lecture, part 1. When we come back, we'll talk about the Abbasid Dynasty and how they spread the faith and the trade that goes on, the cultural interchange that goes on throughout the time period. So that's it for part 1.